I would like to begin today by telling you the story of how I ended up at Creative Mornings. 5 years ago, it's my last year at university. I was at Berkeley, and I break up with my first serious girlfriend. And I'm trying to get over it. I'm doing what a lot of people do in that situation, right? I'm going to the gym frequently. I'm listening to Coldplay frequently. And I'm watching the movie 500 Days of Summer over and over and over again. What I liked about this movie is that in the end, our protagonist, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he plays a character named Tom, he just channels all of his heartbreak into creative work, right? So picture this, he's heartbroken, he wants to be an architect again, so he puts on his headphones and he listens to music and he buys all the books and he starts going to cafes and he studies day and night and works day and night and he's just building himself back up. And I ate this up, right? Like, I even downloaded the soundtrack, took the song from that specific montage and listened to it on repeat and submerged myself in my own little creative journey. I was watching TED Talks and reading blogs and making side projects and learning things and putting stuff on the internet. And when I came out the other end, I had assembled this long list of people that I didn't know about before whose work I really admired. And since I was going to be graduating soon, I decided to cold email all of them. And from that long list, one person got back to me. This is Jerry. Jerry started a conference in New York called The Feast. It's on social impact. Jerry's a beautiful soul. And Jerry gives me a call. And before you know it, I'm hired. Like, I'm going to battle for her. I'm still doing the grad school thing. I'm working nights and weekends for months, just trying to do anything I can to help make her conference possible. And eventually, we meet in person for the very first time. Like, I'm still in California, she's in New York, we meet in LA, and she buys me a beer, so beer in hand, she asks, "So Kevin, what do you want to do when you finish school?" And I respond with 2 words. I say, "This stuff." I just thought she was surrounded by the most ambitious, creative people I had ever met, and I want to be a part of it. And lucky for me, she's like, "You know what? I think down the road I can hire you half-time if you move to New York. And if you're into it, you should probably meet my friend Tina as well. She started this project called CreativeMornings. Maybe she can hire you half-time, and I think she needs help as well." So I fly to New York, I meet Tina, we hit it off, I go back, I sell all of my things. I give my car to my brother, which he sells without telling me, and I moved to New York on July 4th, 2011, and start by splitting my time between these 2 founders for a year. And after 1 year, I become the first full-time employee at Creative Mornings. So we saw how many of you are here for the first time today. How many of you have been to like 10 Creative Mornings? Yeah. What's up? Yeah, Dr. Lonnie, I see you. How many of you have seen the movie 500 Days of Summer? How many of you hate the movie 500 Days of Summer? I see. Yeah, whatever. I'm not going to yuck your yum. You don't have to yuck mine. What I like to do with my time today is just talk to you about this journey through Creative Mornings. Like, talk to you about my journey and how I had the privilege of working for this organization for almost 4 years and took it from 4 cities to over 100 cities during my time. And today there are 57 events happening around the world, like on this Friday. And specifically, I want to touch on 3 things. I want to talk about the process of building the box, like designing our experience for our organizers, these people that put on these events around the world. Secondly, I want to talk about what we looked for in these great people. And third, I want to talk about how we navigate some of the tricky situations that just always come up when you have a community this large, right? There are always conflicts. And at the end, I just want to push a little bit further and ask the question, why? Like, why work on this stuff in the first place? Okay, time for a little history lesson. I'm gonna get mobile. This is awesome. In 2008, Tina Roth-Eisenberg starts Creative Mornings in New York. And her idea is to have a free breakfast lecture for anyone who broadly considers themselves creative in any shape or form. So she's running this event in New York. A few dozen people a month become a few hundred people a month. And in 2010, she hosts a pop-up event in Zurich, like on a family vacation. This pop-up event doesn't end up being a pop-up event at all because a volunteer team quickly forms, this guy named Daniel, and a team there would host Creative Mornings Zurich for years to come. Also that year, John Setzen, an attendee in New York, moves to LA, and he's like, Tina, can I start an LA chapter? She's like, okay, let's do this. And then Greg Story asked to start a chapter in San Francisco. So this is where I come in. I meet Tina for the first time. It's actually Tina, myself, and Craig Shapiro, who's the founder of Collaborative Fund. He's like a chair and advisor for Creative Mornings. And we're sitting down and we're hammering this out, and our little vision forms, which is that someday we want to establish a full-time headquarters in New York for Creative Mornings. It's a small operation, but just a group of people who are dedicated to, shepherding this thing forward. And we would still have chapters all around the world. Just the relationship would be a bit more formal. So let's take Miami, for instance. In Miami, our primary contact there is this guy named Malik. Professor Malik Benjamin, but anybody knows he's Sleek Malik. So Sleek Malik is in Miami. He obviously can't do it alone. He's what we call the host of Creative Mornings Miami. And he has about a dozen people helping him out, and we call them all organizers. So within Miami, there are a dozen Creative Mornings organizers. One of them is the host. That's Sleek Malik. So if you zoom out, a city like Miami and all of the others, we think they can be relatively independent. They will select their own speakers, they will find their own sponsorship, they'll produce their own events. And at the center, we'll have Creative Mornings headquarters, which is where the main responsibility will just be to onboard new cities, bring them into our family, and then shepherd the community forward as a whole. So this next piece is how do we actually make this happen? And I call it building the box. How do we create the experience for our organizers? How do we onboard them? What is that like? And to me, there's this spectrum. On the one end, you have this really well-defined box, right? There are clear, detailed guidelines that tell you exactly what you can and cannot do. And on the other end is our loosely defined box. Maybe it's complete chaos, it's just a lot more open, right? It's more open to interpretation. And with Creative Mornings, the natural inclination was to worry. You're man, I hope the chapter doesn't misrepresent the name and misuse this or that. You worry, because it's, I don't know, Tina always called it her baby, right? It's how do I hand my child off to someone I've never met around the world? But over time, I'd say we moved more towards this loose model. We began to trust a little bit more, and just started thinking about how can we make sure these people flourished creatively. And I want to share with you a quote that I think sums up this strategy really well. There's a man named Douglas Atkin who's done work with Airbnb and Meetup and in LGBT rights through All Out. And for a while, he did research on full-blown cults. He's trying to understand why people joined these really extreme communities and why they were so committed. And his thesis, after researching them for years, was that the common belief is that people join to conform, when really the very opposite is true. They join to become more individual. And so for us, it's why do we need to focus on making these people conform into our little perfect Creative Mornings New York box? Maybe that won't even work everywhere. How can we give them more ownership and let them be individual and have them just understand the expectations? So I'm a really tactical guy at the end of the day. So how did this really look like? I'd say there are two main things. One is we establish really clear guidelines, and you do this through stuff like a written agreement and a handbook and lots of conversations to, cover the stuff that they don't read in the handbook. And it's just, whoever's periscoping, I'm talking to you organizers. What's up? And step two is my favorite. Your favorite too. The best present I ever received growing up was what my mother called a busy box. Don't get confused by my box references. And Christmas, I'm like 11. She gives me this container that's it's rectangular with rounded edges, and it's purple and teal. And inside, it's just stocked with art supplies, right? It's like paper and pencils and pens and crayons and colored pencils and stamps and spirographs and those weird bead things that you put an iron on and it turns into this cool glob, right? And to me, it was just this treasure trove of stuff that I got to explore. And I like to think that's what we did at Creative Mornings. We started just showering them with resources. We were like, here's branding, and here's marketing materials, and here's sample slides, and sample music. And if an organizer makes something that's also useful too, we make it available to everybody. And then they start translating it. And all of a sudden, instead of worrying about how do we police all of these little guidelines, it's about, hey, here's a really clear starting point. We've showered you with resources. Now go make something awesome, and hopefully you will light our brains on fire. With what you do. And the best part is that they did. Today, Creative Mornings hosts don't just host Creative Mornings events. They do, and they understand that it's one event a month, and it needs to be recorded, and it has to be free, but they're also working with illustrators within their communities to create artwork and providing prints, and they're setting up scholarships in partnership with the city. It's wild, and that wouldn't be possible without that layer of trust. As Tina always says, trust breeds magic. So who did we look for, right? Mobile again. I got to interview probably the first 50 cities with some help, and then we shuffled around responsibilities a bit, and people asked, what did I look for in these people? And I would say there were two really important things to finding a great Creative Mornings host. The first one is resourcefulness. So if you've ever put on an event, you realize it's just this ocean of problem solving, right? It's something goes, oh gosh. Yeah, something goes wrong, something goes wrong, something goes wrong, and you have to solve. I remember I was working on the feast, my friend Devin is here today, we're running a hackathon, and then the Wi-Fi cuts out. And it's how can you run a hackathon without internet? And Devin, to me, is I got this. He runs to Verizon. He buys 4 MiFis, and then it's not enough, though. So he also gets iPads, and he signs up for membership, signs up for service so he can hotspot in Wi-Fi. So you know what I mean? It's wild. And the moment you stop trying to troubleshoot what's happening at your live event, you're dead in the water. You have to be really resourceful. The second one is that you need to be a giver. One of my favorite business books is called Give and Take, and it's by the youngest Wharton professor ever. His name is Adam Grant, and he studies generosity. And he talks about givers, and to me, you have to give away so much credit as a Creative Mornings host. It takes a particular person. The chapter is not going to be about you. It is not about the host. It's not about Malik, right? It is about the speaker that needs to shine on stage. It is about the volunteer photographer that is putting in their time. It's about the sponsors giving you resources and the venue that's donating their space. Everyone needs to be recognized and appreciated just enough. You have to have a giving personality to be able to do that. So we grew, and it was amazing, right? So after 2011, we hit 15 cities, 15 becomes 30. We're doubling in size every single year, 60, 120 this year. And of course, we ran into some tricky situations. You have a big community. Of course, there are going to be some conflicts and some miscues and some miscommunications. And I guess I developed a knack for navigating these. Tina likes to say my secret superpower is Fingerspitzengefühl. Any German speakers in the audience, right? So Fingerspitzengefühl, I believe, trying my best, translates to fingertip feeling. And it's meant in a social context. So you have great situational awareness. You're able to respond really tactfully and appropriately. You're super diplomatic. So I would like to share with you some of my Fingerspitzengefühl today. And so this is Kevin's top secret guide to navigating a tricky situation in business. That is the KTSGTNATSIB for short. My secret is that you take this situation, which is, in a business context, you forget that it's professional, and you pretend that it's a personal relationship. You pretend it is friendship or dating or parenting, right? and I will show you what I mean with some real-life scenarios. I will not name any names. We're the organizers. Scenario 1, chapter mutiny. Right? So there's a team out there, and all of a sudden, like, they're in chaos. They're total disagreement. They're sending individual emails to us at headquarters, like totally undermining each other. They're incapable of CCing one another. You're like, wow, what is going on? Like, you can't play nice. To me, this sounds a little bit like parenting, right? And from what I've heard, I don't know anything really about it, but Tina would tell me that when you have kids, if they can't share, you take the toy away. So in this case, I mean, if the team is unable to share this responsibility at the moment, we can let them know that maybe there's a moment where we need to put the chapter on pause so they can sort this out, because we can't sort out these sorts of interpersonal conflicts for them. Bad cop, right? Number 2, talking in circles. I did a lot of work with sponsorship, and sometimes you're talking to a partner and you guys really like each other, but all you're doing is going back and forth. Nothing's really happening, right? You show up to the meeting, it's like, I got some ideas, and they're like, oh, great, we'll circle back. And you're like, oh, I'll circle back too. And you're just like circling each other's circle and circling back, and you're like, when is something gonna happen? Well, it's a little bit like dating, right? In dating, there's this conversation that sometimes happens where you go, so what do you want to eat tonight? It's like, oh, I don't know, what do you want to eat? Well, whatever you want to eat. Like, someone just make an informed proposal about what you two should eat. And if the other person doesn't like it, they should let you know why, and offer an alternative. Third is unexpected tension. So sometimes when, say we're working with a venue, this would never happen at BAM because Ryan is the best person in the world. You're working with a venue, you think everything's good, it's peachy keen, suddenly you start getting some passive aggressive emails, right? They're just pushing back on everything. They're like, the staffing and the timing and the setup. You're like, where is this coming from? Like, I thought we were good. Well, in friendship, I have this saying, which is, it's not about the thing, right? The conflict is rarely about whatever you think the conflict is about. There's likely something else going on. So you don't know at the venue whether or not the board is breathing down their neck, or they're slammed that week, or Jimmy Kimmel's coming to town, right? You just don't know. And your job as a good friend or partner is to figure out what that is, however you can. So by 2014, we're in almost 100 cities. Amazing. And the last big checkbox staring me and the rest of the team in the face was, we got to get all these people around the world in the same room, right? Like, we're Creative Mornings, you got to get them to meet face to face. October 2nd, 2014 is a day I will never forget. Our team had been working for months trying to produce the first Creative Mornings Global Summit. I see some familiar faces. That's where I met Ryan and Maricela. 200 people would fly in from 30 countries. I was like trying to get sponsorship to like bring as many people in, so there was no like barrier to get there. And they were going to spend 3 days together in Brooklyn. And I remember that first night. I'm hanging out with Joel and Colin. They're from DC. And we're talking, and I look over, and oh, God. Oh. I look over, and through the door walks in Susanna from Guadalajara, and Stellian from Bucharest, and Mark from Vancouver, and like, I just lost it. I'm losing it now. Like, oh, I'm so glad this is videotaped. So, it's New York. You can cry in public. It's cool, right? We talk about the intangibles when you are selecting a job, right? You see salary and benefits, and you know there's something else that's really important to you, and it's hard to capture, but there's something else that's gonna like make you satisfied at the end of the day. And this was it, man. Like, it was it in its rawest form. And of course it was. Like, when you get that many people who are working on a common project that have so much to share, but they're from like other sides of the earth, and you put them in the same room, of course it's going to be electric. And for me, like, I knew them in a way. Like, I knew all of these little Twitter profile images, and it's actually really easy to recognize them in person, but there were Skype calls and emails, and I knew personal details, like, you know, their families and where they worked. And to see them coming to New York and sometimes, you know, the United States for the very first time, it was indescribable. And it's the most significant thing I've ever done. Oh, this is it. It was also a capstone. A few days before the summit, I let Tina know that I thought it was time for me to move on. And there were so many good things, but I was getting antsy, and I had this, I mean, I felt like, that's my first gig, and I feel like I need a change of environment to be able to continue growing. And I mean, she knew this was coming. She has her own Fingerspitzengefühl. And she's so supportive, and so I give a 6 months notice. We work on the transition, and on March 20th, 2015, I attend my final Creative Mornings lecture as part of the team, and also have this wonderful send-off. The theme this month is empathy. And when I think about empathy, the first person that comes to mind is a man named Dave. Dave runs this nonprofit next to the Berkeley campus called Stiles Hall. And he's been facilitating this small class there for 30 years. Same class, 30 years. And each semester, Dave takes a group of very diverse students, like 16 to 20. They're mostly selected through referral from past students who have gone through his class. And on a campus that is skewed in terms of race and class, like Dave intentionally puts together this group, which is Asian American and Black and Latino and Native American and white and male, female, lower, middle, upper class, right? Like, he puts this group together, and he assigns you your first homework assignment. He says, I would like you to pair up with someone of a different gender and race that you do not know and share your favorite music. And I still remember sharing John Legend songs with Thalia, who's in the gray hoodie. And your future homework assignments are actually assigned by your fellow students. So each student hosts a homework assignment, and it's about helping your classmates understand your world in some sort of way, right? So I attended Sunday service at a mostly African-American church. I ate brunch at a sorority. I could have had a home-cooked meal with someone's family. Like, it's just about sharing a slice of what your daily experience is like. And you go through these homeworks, and you get together for a few hours every week, and you discuss identity and stereotypes, and you're pushing and prodding and challenging each other and getting pissed off, and sometimes people are crying, sometimes people make up, and you challenge your own assumptions, and by the end of it, you realize that Dave, this wild, wiry genius, has given you this 15-week gift, right? He gave you this gift of a no-strings-attached opportunity to collide with someone outside of your bubble. And when thinking about why Creative Mornings, I kept coming back to this. Like, I can look up billions of people on Facebook today that I'm allegedly connected to, but I also find it increasingly easy to build my own echo chamber, right? Like, hear what you want to hear, see what you want to see. And in a city of 10 million people, I hear stories all the time about how you can quickly feel isolated. So whether it's, Creative Mornings or it's Dave's class, to me, this work is about increasing those collisions, like providing a safe space to do that. And I'm not going to pretend that Creative Mornings is, solving the world's problems, but when I read headlines in the morning that frustrate me, when I think of a senseless act of violence or a broken system, like, to me, this is at least a step. Because you can't teach empathy. It's not about teaching empathy. It's about providing the space to build empathy. My big secret is that these talks, for me, were never about the speaker. Like, the speaker is the flag. Maybe it's a good-looking flag. I don't know. But it's maybe the reason you come, but I think the underlying reason you might come back is because of the people you're sitting next to. after I left Creative Mornings, I went on the trip of a lifetime. On my final day, the team here gave me a round-the-world airplane ticket. How out of control is that, right? Like, Tina and I had always joked that someday I would take the world tour. Like, she has a family, she's like, Kevin, someday you're gonna travel, you're gonna see all these cities that you helped out. And I got to do it. Like, I spent 3 months couch surfing with Creative Mornings organizers in South Africa, as they call it, South Africa, Peru, Prague, Sydney, like all over. And when I got back last month, the big revelation was that these people weren't just great hosts for events, they're great hosts. Like, people are giving up their beds for me to sleep on and taking days off of work to show me around and feeding me amazing food and introducing me to their moms and dads and their girlfriends' moms and dads. Like, it was just this wonderful opportunity to reflect on my journey through Creative Mornings, from those 500 days of summer lonely nights. Not lonely anymore, I love you, Yoko. 4 years going strong. To this stage today. Oh, I got a dope picture to show you. You might ask who took this photo, and I will say I took this photo by putting down a camera, hiding it in some rocks, and leaving video on for like 10 minutes. And raising my arms. What you don't see is that there's a person like right back here that's just like staring at me like, what the hell is this guy doing? He's having his like Walter Mitty moment, just like, ah! I'm back now. I've since started new work. I'm on the team at Classcraft with my friend Devin, who I worked with on the Feast. It's an education company. But before I really embark on that new journey, I see today as a final opportunity to say thank you. So thank you to Tina, thank you to the headquarters team, thank you to the organizers around the world, and thank you to you for being part of it.